From everything you've heard, what is your perspective on, upstream? I'm curious, especially maybe it ties to brokers, maybe not, but why did upstream come to be?
Sure.
And who wants it and why?
So, to do a full-on exposition, we're probably going to need about 4 hours,
Right.
And some sort of, master class. Very briefly, my opinion is the upstream is the creature of the largest brokers in the country and the largest real estate companies in the country. The initial impact that we saw publicly was actually a CMLS in Boise in 2013 when they talked about you have 10 days to shape up or else. I think it is the direct outflow of that. So who wants it? I think it's the largest brokers and the largest real estate companies.
Okay.
Why do they want it? It's because of what I referred to. Competition has changed. It's really different. And they want to either regain some of the advantage they think they had at one point, or they want to eliminate some of the barriers. The impact of it, though, is this is where I got really worried. Right.
All right.
Now, let's be honest. I can say these things because I'm not working for upstream. I'm not privy to any inside knowledge. It's not like I've spoken, so I could be wrong, right? Let's just admit that.
Right.
But the biggest issues, there are a couple, but I'll start with the number one issue that really bugs me about upstream.
Okay.
Before I do that, I just want to point out, if anyone who's read some of my posts and my writings on the subject, I'm a huge fan of the concept of upstream, right? The ability for brokers to have control over their data and where it should go and how it should be used. I'm a huge fan of it.
Okay.
My issue is setting up this entity called Upstream, LLC, outside of the existing structure, and here's why. Number one, what the industry absolutely needs and what the MLS today provides is what I like to call the reference database. Right?
Explain that.
So I guess the best way I can explain it is when people make fun of Zillow for not having accurate data, what are they comparing it to? Right? Accurate data compared to what?
Okay.
There has to be something to compare it to. And today, that's the MLS. In other words, you could say Zillow only has 80% of the listings. Compared to what? Well, compared to the MLS. Because the MLS today is that reference database, right?
It all starts there.
It all starts there. Well, what Upstream has come out, and Carrie Sylvester has actually said in some conference, that Upstream's goal is to be, quote, the single source of truth. What the hell does that mean? I don't exactly know. But if it means that the MLS will no longer be the reference database, then I'm sorry, I've got a problem with it, right? Because I think the MLS is incredibly valuable and important. And if you have multiple, quote, reference databases, I want to know how does that work. Right?
And it doesn't, the MLS kind of polices the accuracy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like they deal with members, they have the ability to find, correct, judge.
Absolutely.
So how does that work in this new?
That's a wonderful question. I wrote a post, right, asking about this. Okay, so if Upstream wants to be the single source of truth, and the MLS is today the single source of truth, or the source of truth,
okay,
and the MLS does the thankless job of having to do compliance,
right?
My question is, in a post-Upstream, who does compliance? And the answers that we've sort of seen in public are kind of mixed, right? I've seen like Victor Lenz say, well, we'll do our part, and then the MLS will do its part. And I'm like, I don't actually understand that, because if we walk through this, there's compliance that's data entry errors, like somebody fat fingered.
Right.
And then there's compliance that's straight up lying, right? Some agent saying, hey, this house has 4 bedrooms. It does not. Who polices that? And today, that's the MLS. And here's another reference. Like that relationship is one that has not been explained to me.
And is it the relationship and also then the timeliness of fixing?
Absolutely. So if something goes off the market, who now is responsible for policing? You have to go in and change the status of that listing. Right?
So
a lot of these questions have not been answered.
And one of the things I'm hearing is that the industry overall, which includes us, people in this audience, that they just don't know much. Like, do these people all know more than you do?
They might. They may be privy to private meetings and I'm not. Right? I'm going by what I see in public.
Right.
And putting, if you will, pieces together.
What are people telling you? You don't have to give names, but you talk to some of these people. Like, what are they saying?
What they're saying is nobody really knows. Right? And I think what their fear, and I think it's somewhat justified, especially given the players that are involved, is this is an effort to essentially undermine the local MLS system, the infrastructure we've had, right? And move towards something that is potentially much more national much more, if you will, single source, much more of a top-down effort, right? And I actually kind of wonder if we're not on the verge of civil war, because some of the people I speak to, some of whom are in the audience, have mentioned things like, we might be on the verge of civil war here, right? And the players are the MLS, the local MLS on the one hand, the Association of Realtors on the other hand, the brokerages, and we need to talk about brokerages in a second, because it's not just, you can't just say brokerages in one unit, right? And then this is the tech companies, and frankly, it's guys like you, it's some of the CRM and technology companies, and that volatile mix is heading in a way that right now, if Upstream in its current format is successful, I seriously wonder what happens to a lot of this careful system that's been built up over decades, right? And I don't feel like this is a reform. Do you know what I'm saying? I feel like this is a potential true threat. So really what I've been advocating from the start, and I'm sort of heartened to see kind of some of the tech that you guys are developing, is I think upstream functionality needs to be delivered, but needs to be delivered by the MLS. And the MLS cannot lose its status as the single source of truth. It has to be the reference database.
And is that because local is best, local knows more, local moves faster?
I think that's part of it. The other part, though, and this now gets into the brokerage.
Okay.
So I actually have arguments with my good friend Sam DeBoer, who's in Seattle,
right?
Because he maintains there's such a thing as a brokerage sphere. I do not.
What does that term mean?
I'm not entirely sure. So he basically thinks like all brokers sort of are in this, have the same aligned interest, and they want the same thing.
But there's a lot of different brokerage, different types of broker. I mean,
well,
broker
is
a thousand different things.
Not only that, but I'm like, well, here's the deal. Brokers are out there in the marketplace every day trying to cut each other's throats, right? They're trying to take market share from each other, and they're competing like crazy, and we hear this all the time. The only place that the brokerage community, if you will, cooperates is the MLS. Right. And that is literally the only place, and that's why I feel like the MLS is a miracle that we need to preserve. If we move out of that context and we talk about the brokerage sphere, one of my biggest questions has to do with, we know, once we take a step back and sort of think about it, we know brokers are competing with each other.
Right.
And we know that traditional brokerages have trouble competing with some of these more alternative styles and so on.
Can you explain, like in a typical MLS, like what percentage are indie broker? Like, doesn't that have an impact too?
You know what? Probably the folks here are much better able than I to answer that. But let's just say that the vast majority of the brokers, of the participants in a given MLS, are going to be small independents.
And how are they thinking about this whole upstream?
I don't think they are. Right? I don't think they are. So here's the thing. I don't know what the composition of the upstream board or the managers is.
Okay.
But I do know what the composition of the Broker Public Portal is. And a lot of the same players are behind both projects. Well, the Broker Public Portal has 2 seats for small brokers. One of those 2 seats is Pacific Union out of San Francisco. If that's a small broker, when this comes down to each local MLS level, right, and that interaction starts to happen, I have a genuine question as to what is the MLS now supposed to do, right? Because a typical, let's say you have 5,000 participant brokers, probably 4,500 of them are going to be small, maybe 3 people and fewer.
Right.
Are you supposed to sort of say, well, you're on your own, right? Good luck in this new upstream world.
So what happens in a future world? If you saw the slide there, I'll show that agent in Florida, Robert Slack,
sure.
Independent guy struggling, has now built a brokerage with 37 agents. He's turning a good income. He's helping these other agents be a good income. What's his future world look like in an upstream world?
That depends on
impacted?
Well, that depends on how dark and dystopic you want to get.
Okay, give us the range.
The range is, I suppose, if somehow the MLS remains the reference database and it still maintains its sort of accuracy and compliance function, and upstream just becomes like a data management, dashboard. Quite frankly, no different than what you guys presented, the Zillow dashboard where brokers go in, and if it becomes that, then no problem, right?
Okay.
There's no impact.
Good.
If, on the other hand, upstream becomes the reference database, and the policies of upstream are set by upstream and whoever are participants in it, and it's not going to be folks in this room, then there's a real question somewhere down the line as to whether this Robert Slack would actually get the data.
Okay.
Or if he does, what are the barriers that might be put into place?
Now, what if he wants to get the data he's got a good relationship with the MLS, and he's having success with Zillow because the MLS is putting his listings up, and he's doing a lot of buy-side stuff, obviously. How does that impact him?
Well, it's really simple, right? Right now, he can do that because the MLS has all the data. Okay, if upstream is the single source of truth, if they're the reference database, who's to say that the MLS needs to have all the data? Right? I mean, that is, and if the MLS has all the data, then the question is, why do we have multiple reference databases? Why is that necessary?
And who controls then, if that database is at a national level?
Who controls it?
Is there a disagreement then between, let's say the MLS, we have partners here. Are they in charge? Is upstream in charge? How does that all, is that where the range of good to bad or whatever your definition is?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, but let's put it this way. If there is a separate company, right? In other words, upstream is not just an idea and a movement, and they go to Art Carter and they go to Bob Hill and say, hey, we want data management distribution out of the MLS. No problem with it whatsoever. If it's a company though, right? Then a company is governed by its board of directors. And just like Zillow is governed by the board of directors, so I would have to say who controls it? The board of directors of that company, right? I mean, and that's potentially a very dystopic vision.
Right.
But because I have no answers, and if you guys are familiar, if you guys have some answers, I would love to hear them. Because I have no answers, I can only draw, right? Like that's what I see coming. And this, to me, is actually a real problem, right? Because then we're threatening the existence of the MLS itself.
Okay.
And quite frankly, if we go back to the 2013 Boise CMLS meetings, I kind of wonder if that's not the whole point in the first place, right? To have some sort of club or nuclear bomb held over the head of the MLS that are, we'll say, problematic, from the perspective of some of the larger entities in our business.
So, if you're an MLS executive in this room, I mean, you've said with much humility you are not one.
Right.
What should they be thinking about? Some it sounds like don't have all the information they want. Like, should there be a proactive standpoint? Do we just watch these betas and see what happens? Like, how should these people?
I assume most of them are actually doing what I'm about to suggest that they do already. And if you are, and if you can share like sort of what you guys know, I would love to hear myself. I would actually want to ask upstream these questions, right? Who is the reference database? Who does compliance? And if we're doing it for you, do you get a copy of the data that we have just cleaned? And if so, do you pay us for a compliance effort? Like, how does this all work, right? I would ask those questions. Art's shaking his head no, right? But I would ask those questions. I would ask questions in terms of things like who then sets, if upstream becomes this national thing, who sets policy? Is that NAR's MLS policy committee? Because we know NAR doesn't have an upstream policy committee, right? Who sets policy? Who makes those decisions? I would want to ask that question. And I guess more fundamentally, I would almost want to know, if I'm an MLS executive today, I'd go to upstream, I'd go to my brokers who are involved, I want to go get it from the board and just literally ask them, what do you think our role is? In your vision, like whatever vision you have painted, what do you imagine us doing? Because right now we're all working in the world where we kind of know what the MLS is supposed to do.
Right.
Some do it better than others, and we can criticize like on the margins and talk about reforms, but we know what the MLS's role is. What is that role in a post-upstream world? No one has answered this question, right? And then finally, this is maybe a personal pet peeve, right? But one of the questions I would really want to know, because no one has given me a satisfactory answer on this.
Okay.
And I've written a long, lengthy post about this, or why I'm so negative, I suppose, on upstream in its current format, is let's say upstream is successful. Okay.
All right.
We have to define success, what that means. But in my opinion, you got to have at least 70% of all the listings in the country flowing through that system, right, for it to be considered successful. Okay, so you have a company who is owned by the largest brokerages and the largest real estate companies in the industry, who's powered by the National Association of Realtors.
Okay.
And you have you are the whatever single source of truth, or you are the entry point, and you manage the data of 70% of the real estate activity in the United States. How exactly is this not a public data utility? Back in 2006, we had this fight vis-a-vis the MLS, and the MLS made the argument we're not a public utility because we are about cooperation and compensation.
Right.
We are about brokers, working with each other. Upstream has sworn up and down they are not the MLS. They have no interest in doing cooperation and compensation. They have no interest in data compliance. They're just interested in data management. Your data utility. How then do we stop HUD, CFPB, any of these federal regulators from coming in, right, and telling, it's like, this is not an antitrust issue. See, that's the thing. We're so obsessed about it's not an antitrust issue.
So what is it?
This is literally, that's awesome what you guys have. We're now going to set the rules for you. Because you're a public utility, we're going to regulate you in that fashion.
So you're a lawyer by trade.
Correct.
And you've kind of written about this, I think, to a degree. Do you think regulators are looking at this right now?
I have no doubt in my mind they're looking at it. Right? I mean, what's funny is I know from talking to you guys and some of my friends, like when you guys merged,
like Zillow and Trulia.
when Zillow and Trulia merged, how long was FTC review? Like 9 months?
Yeah, more long.
Right? And I know some of you guys could share probably experience like what that's like to have the FTC come into your office, come into your business, start asking questions and poking around. And that's just for a merger. I'm saying this is not an antitrust issue. This is not well, you're doing things to be anti-competitive. This is we want to make sure that when you have this data utility, that the consumer is protected, right? Now, and I've written this, a couple of things about that. I went to law school at NYU, and a lot of my classmates are in fact federal regulators.
Okay.
Like, I know those guys.
You know the mindset of these guys?
I know the mindset. And there are two things I would like to just point out about that. Number one, every regulator believes that they know what's best for consumers. Because you can't be a regulator if you don't believe that. And number two, every regulator does not trust the industry, right? Otherwise, you can't be a regulator. You can't just say, well, the corporations know what they're doing, let's just let them do it. No, the SEC doesn't work this way, FTC, FCC, none of the regulators work that way. So they might want to partner, they might want to work with the industry. It's fundamentally, I don't trust the industry. They're going to try and screw the consumer. And I know better I know what's better for the consumer than you do. And I'm saying they're really smart people. Let's invite 10, 15 of them into our industry to look at, so let's take a look at real estate data and what's happening. That to me is the doomsday scenario, right? And as yet, I have not had a good explanation as to why I'm crazy about worrying about that, right? All I've gotten is, there's no problem, there's antitrust counsel all over. That's awesome. This has nothing to do with antitrust, right? In fact, under a public data utility model, it could be, you're a monopoly. We're going to grant you monopoly, but we're just going to tell you what you collect, how you collect it, who you send it to, who you get it from, what you charge, all of it. And I don't think we want to do that. I don't think we want to go down that path. I really don't. I mean, you guys could tell me, are we like huge fans of government coming in and sort of starting to regulate how real estate data is used, processed, and no. So these are like the three main concerns I've got.
Okay. Do we have some microphones in the back? We have a couple people. Anybody that has a question for Rob, now is your chance. So run down this question right down here. Come on down, Sarah. And we have another mic. Where's the other one? And Chris is in the back there. We'll get to you in a second, sir. Let's get to this gentleman right here first. And you do not need to say your name outside. You can just ask your question.
And I guess you're right, and more fundamentally, I want an answer, right? And I think you guys deserve an answer, quite frankly. If you're an MLS board member, if you're an MLS CEO, you deserve an answer as to, it seems like such a quote minor thing, but it's who does compliance? But the bigger sort of underlying question under that is, who is the reference database, right? I mean, if you go to the standards, and I can't remember, there's actual like US department, right, where they keep, various weights, like this is 1 pound. Right? Or
Bureau of Labor or something.
Something, right? And this is 1 foot. Like they actually do that. To me, that's the MLS. If that's not the MLS, then who is it going to be? And if it's upstream, then how does that get going? I mean, there's those, but I want to know that question.
In your dystopian future, are these poor people having their members like call them every hour of the day and saying this stuff, like
I guess it depends how dystopian a future, right? I have a pretty dystopic imagination. But in the ultimate dystopian future, every one of the people in here 10 years from now will be federal employees.
whoa.
Because there will be a HUD office in California that manages real estate data for,
And most of us are too old to think that pension's going to help us. All right, let's go to a question on that side.
Oh boy. So there's the obvious threshold leading question which you asked, which is, can they? No, of course not. They can't, right? And it's the reason, the investment that NAR has made into RPR is the reason why Upstream now exists, right? Because and IAMP and these things, because they need some justification. That's at the deeper thing though that I kind of think about is what's NAR's end game? What is NAR's end game? Is it control over the industry, and the most fractious, most problematic part of which would be the 800, what are we now, 740 local MLSs? Because if that's the end game, then I think we're at the verge of civil war, right? Because I don't know how that's going to play out. And I would love to know. I mean, many of you guys are not just MLS, you're involved with the local association as well. I would love to know how that plays out. And if we need to go to a point where there's a national sort of MLS in some respects, or maybe super regionals, if that goes top down, I think we're probably in for a 5 to 10 year period of just open war until that issue gets resolved. Right? I don't know if that answers your question. So yes, on the threshold, they have to do something. But the deeper issue to me is what's the end game, right? And is that something that the industry, not just you guys, but the brokers and agents, is that something we want?
Okay, let's go down here in front.
Number one, like I mentioned, I apparently have this immunity that allows me to do those things. But the second thing is, when I get blacklisted completely out of that organized real estate world, I'm going to come to you and ask for some help to feed my family. But yeah, look, I mean, I think I will, because the reality is the reality. And I think we sort of, as an industry, and here's the thing, I don't expect the agent on the street, I don't expect the brokers, who are out there like working their asses off trying to make a living. It's not their job to necessarily have to think about these things. I think it's your jobs to think about these things. I think it's our jobs to think about these issues and have some come to Jesus moments and have some discussions around it. If a single national MLS, if Upstream solving the world's hunger problem, if that is what we want, if that is best for your members, if that is best for brokers, if that is best for consumers, you know what? Maybe we ought to embrace it. My issue is no one's laid that out, right? And my issue is, up till now, the MLS has done a pretty decent job of making sure that the agents, the brokers, the consumers are benefiting. Like I said, believe me, I could criticize some of the things that we kind of do as an industry, but on the whole, it's pretty damn good, right? In other words, we're talking about minor reforms, and again, I could say, look at the way things are in residential, look at the way things are in commercial. It's not close, and it's because of the MLS. So before we throw that baby out with the bathwater, how about we sort of really ask some questions and really figure out, is this what we want? And I think that moment of truth might be coming this year, next year, or the next 3 years. And let's put it this way. If I'm the only idiot out there talking about these things, this is not going to go very far, right? Because I'm one guy, and I'm a industry pundit, some blogger. But if the people in this room start talking about these things and asking these tough questions, that's a different deal. And I think, I don't know, I mean, I understand for a lot of you guys, this could be a real political risk. I totally get it. But maybe your boards need to start having, some real come to Jesus moments, start struggling and wrestling with some of these issues. Every MLS, every association I know of does strat planning practically every year. Well, if you're not talking about this, then what the hell are you talking about in strat planning, right? If you're not actually having conversations about, do we want to be a bottom-up organization or a top-down organization, what are you talking about? So I think, I can be out here doing my, John the Baptist routine. But quite honestly, somebody with real authority and real power needs to start asking these questions to those people and getting some straight answers. And that's my take. And I think if I could do anything, if I could just appeal to all of you, start asking those questions, right? Because we all, I make my living from this industry too. We all need to know what it is that we are planning, what it is that we are heading into. So believe it or not, the issue of photos and copyrights is something that I'm personally involved with right now in a couple of things. It's far more complicated than actually we could get into it. But at a high level, I'll say this. I think the issue of photos is the exact same thing as the issue of data. It's the exact same thing. The ultimate question, bottom line is, who is the reference database? If the MLS is a reference database, then you upstream need to just be a data management dashboard or what have you, an add-edit form, something that sits on top of the MLS, right? And compliance, the data accuracy, all those things happen at the MLS level, and they need to defer to that. If they're willing to do that, then quite frankly, I feel like all the other stuff can be worked out. All the other stuff can be worked out. But if they say, no, we want to be the reference database, and we will send you the MLS, the data you need when you need it, that's a different deal, right? Then the MLS is no longer the reference database. Because at some point you have to start asking questions of, what is the accuracy rate of the MLS compared to what's in upstream, right? And if that's what the mechanism, if that's the system that they want to build, it's not just photos. It could be misrepresentation about the size of the house. Who's responsible for that? And the lawsuits are going to start cascading down that, because they'll sue Zillow, and then Zillow will just go, okay, well, we have indemnity provision from our data providers, who are, I guess, you guys or upstream, so we'll sue them, and then it just cascades. It just, nobody knows the answer to that right now. And I guess going back to kind of my previous thing, I can ask those questions and get promptly ignored. If you guys start asking those questions, it's much harder to ignore, right? Fundamentally, though, it's really simple. Fundamentally, to me, the big question is, who is the reference?
Can I ask you a related kind of business? Like, I'm looking at our logo up there. We're not perfect, but one thing we've tried to be is transparency is a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm hearing like anti-transparency here from when these people ask questions. Why is there not transparency through this whole thing?
I wish I knew. I think my only guess is I feel like organized real estate, for some reason, in like the last 50 years, has developed a culture of secrecy. And it's the only sort of way I can explain it. Like, there are things that are secret and confidential and kept hush hush. That I'm like, why are you keeping that secret? I don't actually understand. But it's the culture within organized real estate.
Okay.
I think that's mine.
Question in the back there.
So I'm going to try and take that in reverse order. And the revenue model, I suppose, right? If we move into some world where the MLS is no longer the reference database and you're just the cops, you're just the compliance folks, I guess you got to charge for compliance, right? So for every listing that you want us to clean, it'll be $5 or whatever the number is based on your cost structure and so on. I suppose that would be the only business model. As far as the first question, I think the question was whether AMP and RPR are kind of the same. They are the same thing, right? Unless I'm told otherwise, unless I hear differently. My understanding is AMP and RPR use the same database, and everything will go into there and then flow out from there. It's the exact same it's the exact same database. So once again, we go back to that question: who is the reference database? Will AMP and RPR be checked against the MLS database for accuracy, or the other way around? And if an MLS is actually on AMP, is that even necessary? Because the MLS itself is now AMP, right? It's so, gosh, I wish we had another 2 hours, like get into some, but it's a lot of mystery, it's a lot of lack of answers. But I would go back to those couple of things, right? Make sure you find out, get some answers.
One final question for you. Do you find it interesting, humorous? You've been following what Zillow Group has done. You've been following with these. It seems like only 2 or 3 years ago, these folks were worried that we were going to become an MLS.
Right.
Now we sit here as partners.
Right.
How do you?
So I have to say, I'm looking at your dashboard that you guys showed earlier in the session, and I'm looking at it going, if I have this, what exactly do I need upstream for, right?
Okay.
So I don't know, maybe I'm reading between the lines, maybe I'm doing my leaps of logic thing, but if what I want to see happen is that the concepts of upstream, the concept of control over listings,
Okay.
the concept of brokers being able to utilize their data is what I would like to have, but I want it done through the MLS, and you guys just happen to have built this dashboard that seems to enable that thing, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to stick around for some of the other things you're going to show with Redsley, but I suspect I could kind of imagine what that's going to look like. Could we make some inferences? Could we draw some conclusions as to what that might mean over the next 2 to 3 years?
You don't get to ask me the question.
Yeah, I'm asking, it's more of a rhetorical question, shall we say.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rob Hahn.